one thing that I always wished was that you'd kept a diary, because of the number of stories and the number of funny things and the classic moments on ice that happened. And I know that for me, a lot of those moments were when Ken and I were together. So I just think there's some great stories here to share. There's some funny things, and it also gives a different perspective as to what life was like in the stripes on the ice.
And Ken, you bump your head and you agreed to do this with Dave. What will you hope to share with everybody today?
First of all, I didn't agree. You had to pay me. That's number one. We did have a lot of really good times, a lot of laughs out there. We did a lot of what I would call big hockey games, important hockey games, which were very enjoyable to be a part of, because it's not only being on the ice, it's the mental and physical challenge that I really enjoyed. And then you add in the camaraderie with the guys that you're on the ice with Dave and Glenn Campbell and Bobby Mills and just so many guys. Those are back in the early days, and we had a lot of fun. But at the same time, we did a lot of what we felt was pretty big hockey.
Tell me about one of the big hockey games that you guys did together.
Well, it's got to be the Canada-Russia game.
Oh yeah, absolutely, the Canada-Russia game with Bob Mills. I think Glenn was with us too.
No, just the three of us. You and I.
It was back in the three-man system.
You and I and Millsy.
Moscow
Dynamos.
What year was this?
Oh boy, you're really dating us.
In the 80s, wasn't it? It had to be in the 80s.
Definitely in the 80s.
Yeah. Moscow Dynamos and Canada's national team.
Oh yeah.
Playing here at the Gardens. I was really fortunate that I got my international card, which is called a level 6, and so I did quite a few of those games. Rouyn-Noranda and Timmins and Elliott Lake here, but the game here, the game's going along quite well, and it's really, really good hockey. They're up and down the ice, and they can really skate, and all of a sudden there's a huge commotion over at the Moscow bench, and we kind of look over there, and it looks like Bob Mills and one of the Russian players are maybe having a little tussle. Not maybe, they were having a little tussle.
No, actually it was a one-way tussle.
And anyways, we blow the whistle, and Dave gets over there first, so...
Well, I see the play's coming into the zone, and I'm the front linesman. Ken goes by, and I said to him, Millsy's having some trouble at the bench. And the play goes in, and I look back over, and as Ken says, there's a schmozzle. And I blow the whistle, and I yell at Ken, I go, holy crap, Millsy just hit one of them. And then we get over there, and I'm standing there, and Bob's like this, and I said, Millsy, what happened? Can't talk. And then he gets over there and continue on. What was it, Boris? What was it, Mikhailov?
Mikhailov was the coach, which one of their famous players and their coaches, and he wanted too many men on the ice, but now Bob has sort of pushed this guy right over top of the bench. Now it's questionable how the guy went over the bench, but it might have been a punch. But the player goes right over, and it was all over too many men on the ice, which I didn't call my weakest moments, let alone.
Well, you see, what led up to it was Bob gets in front of the bench, and he feels a tug on the back of his sweater. He kind of shakes it off, and then again. Then all of a sudden, boom, he gets butt-ended in the back of the head. And he turns around, and the guy butt-ended him in the chest. Well, I don't know if Ken did, but I was refereeing when Bob played. And he was a tough hockey player. And he just went back into player mode, and boom.
Reflex.
Yeah. And so now, then the best part was him having the conversation with Mikhailov, who was the only guy, I guess, on the bench that spoke English.
That would admit it. Because most of these Russians, quite a few of them spoke English, but they didn't speak English when there was a penalty. But if you're looking for assists, their English became exceptionally good. They were over there, telling you how they passed the puck and they should be getting an assist. But he wanted to leave, right? And of course, I didn't want an international incident, but I wasn't calling a penalty at the same time. So it went back and forth. And
But who were you going to give the penalty to?
yeah, Bob in the box. But it went back and forth, and it was probably on the edge of probably they're going to leave. But I did find out quite a while later that they get quite a bit of money and products like their equipment to come and play here. Mm-hmm. And one of the Hockey Canada guys back then, it was a CHA, but said that there was no way they were going to leave.
Yeah.
But we didn't know that then, and that's like in the back of my mind and my concern. They went a while later.
Yeah, you're concerned. There's a word that really cropped up.
A while later. Go ahead.
Well, so he gets everything in the same game. We now go to a face-off in the corner. The puck drops. There's a gathering at the net, and I go in. Boom! I get cross-checked across the face by one of the Russians. And I look over at him, and I look over at Kenny, and he goes,
"Not tonight."
So we get into the
we already had one incident.
We get into the dressing room, and I go, "Okay, what's the explanation on that one?" He says, "Yeah, it was a penalty." He said, "But if I'd called anything right then and there," he says, "they were going home." And I said, "Who cares?"
Yeah.
But that had to be the most interesting game.
Yeah, without question, it was one of the most interesting as far as the Russians involved, and it was really good hockey. Playing Team Canada, it was just really enjoyable.
Who was on the Team Canada team that you can remember?
The goalie was Joseph.
Curtis Joseph?
Chris Felix. Chris Felix. He was the captain of the team.
Yeah.
It was the amateur team. It wasn't the NHL team. It was Canada's national team.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Way back then in the 80s, the pros weren't playing.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them had been pros and were coming back and playing just so they could, go to the Olympics and play at the World Championships and stuff like that. Yeah.
So this guy shows up in town. We had a good little core of guys here. There's a lot of senior guys that were basically at the end of their refereeing career, and those are the guys that I came along with. And they had their own version of how games should be called and shouldn't be called, and what was acceptable. And there was a fine line, and that's kind of what I learned. So I'm doing a game out at Pelangio Rink, and I was an instructor in the referee certification program, and he thinks it's midget. I thought it was Bantam. It was probably midget. And this guy walks into the dressing room. No one knows who he is. He walks in, and he sits down beside me, and he goes, "You're Dave Saad?" And I go, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you didn't do a bad game." He said, "But there's things you can improve upon." He said, "I'm going to help you, and if you listen," he says, "you'll get into some good hockey." At which point I said, "Who are you again?" Because no one knew who this guy was. All of a sudden he showed up, and in fairness, it brought us to a different level. Yeah, it's like you came from up north.
Hearst.
Okay, and you were refereeing up there.
I was. And I came to town and happened to be the highest certified official because when I was in the military, I was out in Vancouver Island, and I had gotten my level 5 out there, and the level system was 1 to 6. So to get your 5, you're doing junior hockey, major junior hockey, and then I joined the OPP and go to Hearst for a little over 3 years, and I'm refereeing up there and actually doing a lot of really good hockey, the intermediate hockey. And, juvenile hockey was really big then. I remember was not the North Bay Trappers, it was the juvenile team. They were
Wasson.
no, weren't they the Coca-Cola guys?
Seal test?
Something like that. But anyways, they come up to play against Hearst, and it was really good game, and I got to do that game. But then I come down here, and I'm the highest certified guy. I'm a national instructor, national supervisor, and transferred down here with the OPP, and of course my first game is at Pelangio, and I watch a bit of the game and play a few games because that was part of my makeup, was having fun with the guys, you know. I used to call him and Glenn and the other guys and ask them a rule question, and they'd answer, and I, you know, is that your final answer? Do you want to call a friend? You're going to stick with that answer, you know? And a lot of times they had the right answer, and I'd get them to change.
Well, you got poor Glenn Campbell. Glenn's still involved. Glenn was a really good official, and he'd phone Glenn, and he'd play that silly game with Glenn, and Glenn would go for it. Well, that's what I thought. And he'd phone me, and I'd say, yeah, here's what I'd do. And he says, are you sure? Yeah, that's what I'd do. But I want to go back to his police training, okay? So we're doing a game. It's a Centennial game. You know, there's the referee circle, which is like the no-fly zone for players. They can't come in there. So we've had a schmozzle on the ice, and he's called whatever he's called, which is odd for him to call any penalties. And there's a player there, and I'm standing between Ken and the player. Now, you got to remember, he's part of the TRU team, okay, the Technical Rescue Unit. And he's also, weren't you an instructor in hand-to-hand something? He's an instructor. Mm. So this guy is trying to get at him, and I'm holding him up, and I look at him, and I go, why am I protecting you from this guy? And he chuckles. He says, you're not. You're protecting him from me.
Yeah.
But those are the types of things, the interaction we had on the ice. Tell me about Robbie Nichols, when he'd scored a goal.
He played with the Centennials, you know, pretty good player. And he scores a goal, and I'm just about to drop the puck, and he skates in. Millsy, just hang on. What am I hanging on for? He says, I want to hear them announce my name. Okay. So we let them announce it, and then we dropped the puck, and we had a few laughs over that.
Do you remember your first OHL game?
My first exhibition game.
Well, your first OHL game.
That wasn't my first game, though.
No?
No, my first game had been in Sudbury the year before, when I was trying out before the Centennials got here. But my first OHL game, I think there was 17 fights.
Well, you didn't do that game with me. I did the first game here. Brent LaBrosse and I and some guy from out of town. I forget who.
Okay, so I'm mixing it. I had a pile of fights.
Yeah. Well, so the big deal, the Centennials have arrived.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be the first preseason game between the Centennials and Sudbury, which automatically is going to be a problem in the first place. So Brent LaBrosse and I were the linesmen, and we get out there, and 17 seconds into the game was the first of 11 fights that night.
Nice.
So when you go out to break up a fight, the senior linesman calls the colors. So I was a senior linesman, so I say, you got green, I got black. Well, I didn't realize that black was Mark Hatcher, 6'5", 255 pounds. But fortunately with him, you could talk to him. Like he didn't really ever want to fight. People want to fight him because of his size. Mm-hmm. But there was one game, and when you break up a fight, you're supposed to go under the arms and lock. And I did that one night with Hatch, and the next thing I said to him, I said, Hatch, put me back down on the ice. He still lifted me right off the ice.
Yeah.
But those early days in the OHL, they played for keeps, didn't they?
It was no question. It was a lot tougher hockey. Different rules.
Yeah.
They could have 3 fights before they're rejected. They protected their players a lot more, especially their stars.
Yeah.
If something happened on the ice, it didn't take long for somebody to pay him back. Mm-hmm. I don't believe we've had a bench clearing brawl in the OHL in a long, long time. But during my time on the ice, I had one referee, I had 3.
If you called more penalties, you may not have had that many.
Yeah. Hamilton, the Sioux, and Peterborough. And but the hockey was really good. There was the one time North Bay's playing the Sioux in the Sioux, and the big guy Ken English, and then Jeff Bookaboom, two huge defensemen, like probably as big as they come, and they're Bookaboom staring down one of the North Bay players, and he's kind of looking at him, and he says to him, "How do you like hospital food?" The guy looks at him. No, I don't like hospital food. But there was lines like that really, it kind of made you laugh too. Although you're not supposed to be out there laughing, you're trying to control the players. But there was.
Well, Bookaboom was here one night, and Tommy Warden, who played for the Centennials, and Tommy just was a character. So they're standing at the blue line, and Bookaboom's got the gloves dangling, and they're staring each other down. And Bookaboom says to Tom, he's really, "Ready to go?" And Tom pauses and looks at him dead right in his eyes and goes, "Not really." and then what's the guy do? What's the guy do? And I mean, toughest guys that played for North Bay. Who are the toughest guys? Who would you say were the toughest guys?
I can't even think of his name now. He went to Edmonton, played with Edmonton for a while.
Crowder, Bonby.
Bonby.
Dennis
Bonby, yeah.
Dennis came in here with a reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And, over a period of time, because they're the home team, you get to know the players. So, second or third game, he comes out, and for the pregame warm-up, and the linesmen are on the ice, and he comes over and he taps me in the shins, and, "How you doing?" "Good. 12, 16, and 24. And I looked at him and I go, "What's that?" He says, "I know who I'm going to fight in a game, and I want to let you know so you don't jump in and get hurt." He'd come out and tell you in advance. So we break up. The first fight I broke up with Dennis, we're going back. I'm taking him to the penalty box, and he says to me, he says, "I'll never be a problem as long as you don't ever grab my sweater." He says, "Don't grab my sweater." He says, "I'll never be a problem breaking up a fight." So, I mean, I was bright enough to figure out that not to grab Dennis's sweater. But again, like Kenny says, those are the kinds of conversations that you could have on the ice.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And you don't get to hear those very often, right?
No.
You came here at a pretty good time in the 80s with the kind of hockey that we had going on in North Bay. We had the OPSU, we had the Loblaws, we had the Air Canada. We had the Centennials. They arrived.
Come in. Yeah.
And we had I think it was the midget hockey in the '89 Ontario Winter Games.
But the Air Canada Cup, that's the game that Notre Dame played Pine Hill Coffee Shop.
Yep.
I was refereeing in that tournament. Once they got to the final, I didn't think I'd be working the game because I was the local referee. Or the referee from Sudbury. We had somebody.
Houston wasn't Houston here?
No, Houston come up. Yes.
Yeah.
Jack Smith. I was thinking the
Jack,
referee from Sudbury. Anyways, it was out of town referees. But anyways, for some reason they say no. We want this guy to do game, and Notre Dame agrees. And
two local linesmen too, Soupy and I.
And two local. Well, I think all the linesmen were local, I believe. No, there might have been some Sudbury guys. Mm-hmm. But anyways, we do the game 2-0, the final for a Pine Hill Coffee Shop. 2 penalties, 1 to each team, and the place is sold out and probably over the fire capacity.
Oh, for sure.
It's just jammed, and so you really had a great atmosphere in there, and then really good hockey, and then the home team wins. But that was a game that I personally really enjoyed doing. But it was an easy game to do from our perspective because all we did was basically call the offsides, icing, skate up and down the ice. When you only call 2 penalties in a game, which I didn't call many penalties. I readily admit that. I let them play the game, mm-hmm. And it was a different style back then. We could do that.
Well, it's interesting that you were, the Pine Hill team with Darren Turcotte, and all those other guys that ended up on the Centennials. When I came to Canadore, I was the OHL student doing for the OHL News. So I got to cover them in 86, 87.
Yeah.
And actually in this magazine on page 32 is a picture of Nick Kipiros.
Mm-hmm.
And 87, wasn't that the big series we had?
Is that the year they won?
With Oshawa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Super Series.
Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah.
Right?
As a matter of fact, funny, Nick was on the Jeff Merrick show, no, with McCowan last week on his
okay.
podcast.
Yeah.
And it was from his home, and in the background was his framed North Bay Centennials jersey.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, pick up that magazine, the one underneath. Yeah, and on page 32, you'll see the
back.
picture. And I made it right at the back, the last page.
Last page.
Oh.
There we go, right at the top there.
Oh, the action. Ooh, that's a good action picture.
Pretty cool, eh?
Yeah.
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 So I sold that as I was a starving student there looking for beer money. I sold that print to the guy making the check that was on the Rangers team for $20 for an 8x10 black and white of that shot. And then I tried to sell it to Nick. And Nick's like, why would I want that? I said, well, it's the last print. Don't you want to get it out of circulation? And he paid $10 for it.
Well, you got the Greek guy. I mean, he's going to bargain with you.
Yeah.
So it's one of my better shots from that period. And so I like to bring it up once in a while. I'm sure Nick would appreciate it if I didn't. But it was a good shot. Right after that check, he got up and he went and checked the guy cleanly in his own corner, just ran him right over. Just like he didn't waste any time getting back. Right? It was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Worst game that you did? Where's the toughest game that you ever had?
Toughest game. Wow. I would say I went to Australia to referee the World Sea Pool. And two of the teams there is North Korea against South Korea. Of course, they're fighting back home. So the directorate, a guy from the International Ice Hockey Federation, he was actually a Swedish guy, says, you're a policeman, you're a Canadian referee, you're going to referee this game. I go, okay. So the tournament's being played in this mall, just like the West Edmonton Mall with the rink at the end. Same kind of setup with a rink in there. And the walls are all mahogany, and even the dressing rooms are really, really nice, eh? And I guess they thought of that, and they said, well, we can't play those guys against each other here. So anyhow, they move it to a place called Blacktown. Perfect, Blacktown. We get there, our normal hour and a quarter, hour and a half before the game, and they're lined up forever. And we go in and we're getting all kinds of dirty looks and cat calls because we're walking in there because it's already sold out, and these people are waiting.
Yeah.
Because they told them that if anybody's ejected, we will sell tickets. Eh? So we go in there, and sure enough, pretty much before the game starts, there's 4 or 5 that are thrown out, and then they sell more tickets. Then there's an incident where they put up some kind of propaganda sign, and they call me over the penalty box and they make an announcement, and the guy tells me the announcement is if the sign doesn't come down, all the fans will be removed from the rink. All right, so it's like a Mexican standoff, and it's really quiet in there, and then all of a sudden the sign comes down, but everybody who touched that sign, out they go. And they sell more tickets. And I was told there's 200-300 more tickets sold than what in the building. It was like a West Ferris kind of a thing, but seats all the way around. Maybe sat about 2,000. Eh? So as the game's going on, I got an Australian linesman, and I got an American linesman because I asked for 2 linesmen that could speak English because there's Japanese and there was a Chinese guy there and. Yugoslavian, but these are the only 2 guys who could speak English. I said, you're going to give me that game, I need guys I can talk to, and they did that. So whistle goes, and there's a guy on the ice, and the American comes over and said he speared him. Who? Number 4 for North Korea. Okay. So they kind of help this guy in there do the thing. And I go over to the bench, number 4, North Korea. And the benches had interpreters, eh? And no number 4. No number 4 in the ice. None there. And the Australian guy kind of taps me and he says, he's under the bench. He's laying under the bench. I go, what? I look, I go, get him out of here. So the guy comes out from under the bench, comes over the door, sticks his tongue out at me, and skates off. And I go, okay. Anyways, we get through that game, and the backup referee is the Chinese referee. And he was not a very good referee, but he was a university professor at the University of Beijing and spoke actually really good English. And he comes and sits down and he's just shaking his head. He was more upset about the game and wound up the game than all the rest of them. And then actually us, and we sat there and had a couple of beers and we're talking about the game. And when we go to leave, there's still fans there. They're still celebrating. I can't even remember which side won, whether it was the North or the South, but one of them did win the game. Yeah. And but it was as tough a game with really a lot of dirty checks, a lot of penalties called. I had no choice. I had to call penalties. You would have been impressed.
New experience.
It was a new experience. But then, a few days later, I do the championship game between Yugoslavia and Belgium, and there's like 3 penalties, and it's like 5-4. An incredibly good game in a nice bright arena, back to the mahogany, and really really good hockey, and it was a lot of fun to work it, but no stress at all. Just basically let them play, It was good, but it was quite the experience.
You see, we joke a lot. We did, because one of the things that Ken always preached in dealing with us was game management. And he didn't believe, he didn't have to. He didn't call a lot of penalties. I believed that if he gave me the book and the rules, we call them. So I'm doing a game. It's an NOHA final game between Heinz Midgets and IBEW from Sudbury. And I had done the lines the night before, and Ron Phillips had refereed, and I think Ron had 35 penalties. And North Bay pulls an upset. They win the game, which never should have happened based on the caliber of the players, apparently, for Sudbury. So I think it was the deciding game. I get the deciding game the next day, refereeing. So we get into the game, and it is a war. I had 2 linesmen, Mo Willette, Mo was just a great guy, and I had a guy called Mike Lesage. We call him Big Red. Fight breaks out. One guy manhandles Mo. He gets up and he starts coming towards Mike. And Mike was a big boy, and he just took one look at him, and I won't use the language he used, but basically he said to him, "You take one more step, we'll be burying you at center." Player turned around. So we get through the game. I think I had something like 47 or 48 minor penalties, 9 game misconducts, 4 match penalties. The score is tied 6-6. The Heinz player goes across the blue line, scores the go-ahead goal, and it was right in front of the Sudbury bench. A guy by the name of Stortini, I think, was the coach. Well, he thinks the play is offside. He jumps on the ice. He's got toe rubbers on, and he comes running at me. I'm about center ice. He comes running at me, yelling and screaming that it was offside. So as he gets from Ken to away, I just kind of step aside, and as he's going by, I say to him, "When you come to a stop, keep going. You got a game misconduct." We get down to, I think, 42 seconds left in the game. Face off in the neutral zone. Mark Hewitt is taking the face off for North Bay. He pushes the puck forward so that he's got to break towards the empty net. As he goes by, the Sudbury player pulls the feet out from under him. Now I got to call the tripping penalty. I call the tripping penalty, and Sudbury sends over their spare goalie to serve the penalty because Sudbury had run out of players. And so you can't have your spare goalie serve a penalty. The game's over. Hines win the NOHA. And we needed a police escort to get off the ice because of the Sudbury fans. But that was one tough game. A guy, one of the two players that was left on the Sudbury team was Guy Blanchard.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. But that was interesting.
How long did you ref, Ken?
Oh, I probably started when I was 16, I was born and raised in Montreal, and got 1994. I got off the ice, so just trying to think here. I probably was certainly into my 40s, but I've still stayed involved.
Yeah.
Like this is my 40th year in the OHL. Started as a referee, and then became a supervisor, officiating manager, and now I have another hat. I'm the director of security for the league.
Oh, okay.
I've been doing that for 12 years, so doing it a long time, and a lot of different places. You know, I started off in Montreal, and I was in Ontario. I actually got my first certification in Barrie, Ontario, when I was in the military, and then out west, and then back to Ontario. Lived up in Hearst and here. Then I got transferred from here and to Berks Falls. We moved to Sunridge, and then I got transferred back and came back here.
What years were you in Hearst?
76 to 80.
Huh?
Yeah. I came here March of 1980. Yeah.
That was you mentioned earlier. I mean, we used to. I think that the time that when we were refereeing, we were really, really lucky because there was just an abundance of good hockey to do. Locally, we traveled. I think for 2 or 3 years, you and I and Tim Foster, we were doing Huntsville, Parry Sound.
In the OHA.
Yeah, in the OHA, Aurelia. But when you went north, they had the intermediate hockey up there. The Timmins team was coached by Bep Woodland, who had been the coach of the Boston Bruins. And he'd been from up there, but he lived in Toronto, and he'd travel up for their weekend games. And if you wanted to see hockey where they played for keeps, because was it the Rouen team had all the Bordelos?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you had Rouen, you had Val-d'Or, you had Timmins, and you had Kirkland Lake. So we go up to Kirkland Lake one night. He's refereeing, I'm his linesman.
Oh, jeez.
And the Kirkland Lake rink, when you came out of the dressing room, you had to walk down to the ice. It was like a bowl. So it was a tight game. We're into the third period. Shoot the puck, quick in and out. Kenny signals a goal. Well, the goal judge doesn't put the light on. So the play stops, and he gets us together, and he said, "What'd you see?" I said, I saw it all very clearly. It went in the net. I forget who was the other linesman. Yeah, same thing. Goal. So there's banging on the glass at the far end. It's the goal judge with a broken hockey stick. And he's banging on the glass because he's adamant that the puck never went in. So Ken goes down and has a conversation with them. And as Ken's coming back, broken hockey sticks comes flying over the glass, and the goal judge is heading up the stairs and out the back door of the rink.
Yeah.
I didn't see him leaving though.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm getting ready to drop the puck, and buzz from the box. I look over, and they're waving me over. And so I just get over. You don't have a goal judge right now, but we're working on getting you one. Okay, where did he go? He said, it's not the first time it's happened, so don't take this personally.
I think one of the best road trips that we went on was in the OHL, and we did a Friday night in Kingston at the Frontenacs. We did the game, and there was Ken and I and a guy that you know very well, Dave McClellan.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next afternoon, we're traveling to Toronto to do a game in Maple Leaf Gardens. Now, the game is absolutely secondary to the fact that we're going to be skating on the ice in the Shrine. Now, had you done?
Oh, I had done it a few times.
You'd done games there.
Yeah.
I'd been to Maple Leaf Gardens, I don't know how many times, but I'd never obviously been on the ice. Mac had never been to Maple Leaf Gardens. So we walk in, and he's like a kid in a candy store. We're walking down the hall, and I said, did you see who just walked by us? No, who's that? I said, Johnny Bauer. Johnny Bauer! And away Mac goes.
Yeah.
So we get in the dressing room, I put her stuff in there, and they had a press room where you could go in and get a coffee or whatever. So we're in there and standing with Mac, and I said, you see who's across the room? Who's that? I said, Bobby Clark. Bobby Clark! And away he goes, and he's telling him about how he's from the same town as Bill Barber. Well, I'm not really from the same town. We're next door, and he's going on and on and on. So it's time to start thinking about getting ready. So Ken and I go into the dressing room, and we're getting ready. And we're down to tying our skates up, and we're still a two-man system because Mac hasn't shown up yet. Finally, he comes running in through the doorway, and he goes, the hell with the game. There's too much to see and do here. and then that night, we had stayed. We were going to go to the Quebec Nordiques. We're playing the Leafs that night.
Yeah, we're staying there.
And we were staying, and the fact we were from the north, the guys, the minor officials and the off-ice officials and everybody else, they treated us like, are you sure you got tickets for the game? And that's, it's one thing I've always remembered about Dave, was that night and that day in Maple Leaf Gardens was pretty special.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Biggest mistake we made was showing him the press room.
There you go. Yeah.
he couldn't believe it. It's like the hot stove league, There's all kinds of different pros in there, and all the scouts that come in, to watch the games, and they always seem to go there because it was like a meet your friend day. All their friends would be there, and then be all the conversation, and they'd be all their little groups in there. It was actually interesting to watch them too.
I had one experience there, and it was in 1992. Terry Crisp, Tampa Bay, was playing, and I was there because I was working for a paper up in Huronia, but they had the guy, Chris Contos.
Yes.
He was on Tampa Bay and whatnot, so I was going to feature him because he was from Midland, which was part of where I was working for. And so I got to be up there in the media room, and I ended up sitting beside Contos' agent. So, filled in the whole bit, filled in a little bit too much because he was talking about how Crisp and those guys aren't giving Contos ice because of they wanted to promote this other guy, and there's contract negotiations going on, and there's other stuff that was way above my pay grade. But so I'm in the change room doing an interview, and I got to interview Terry Crisp. I'm from Cape Breton, so big deal. And I asked him, I said, are you not playing Contos because of all this stuff this agent told me, right? Should
Wrong,
never have, right?
wrong,
Well,
wrong
Terry ripped me a new one, and he called me all kinds of things, and I'm like, oh my God, this is great, right? I'm trying to write notes, I'm shaking, I think he's calling me an asshole. It was fantastic. That was my one experience.
That was your big moment there? Yeah, no, that was a great moment.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing, when Ken got here, as I said, the hockey was just burgeoning. There was so much good hockey. But we had a really good core of guys here. I think Kenny was a level 6. I think there was 5 of us that were level 5s. We all tried to go back and do, if we could, one night a week, work with minor hockey, just to be out there with these guys. Kenny had coordinated a really good supervision program where we were out working with the kids. And we tried to help the kids, but no matter where we went, we had a core of guys that there was a real camaraderie. And I think, fair to say, you don't see those guys anymore. A guy like we tell the story about Bob Mills, he was just a great partner on the ice. I think of guys like him. I think of Bruce Kitchen, who was absolutely nuts. Lee Rose.
Lee Rose. He was a classic.
Lee,
Mr. Prim and Proper.
Yeah. Lee came in as a young kid. How did he get here? No, was it down from Boston, weren't they? Or,
yeah, his dad was in the OPP.
Yeah.
And he lived in Powassan, but was refereeing and basically worked his way up to doing junior and doing the OHL lines.
Well, then he was supposed to get a shot, and he did. But Lee,
A Rose kid
that was
got a
his
shot with
son.
Howland, eh?
That was
Yeah.
his son.
That's his son.
No
That's his
kidding,
son.
eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, right
Yeah.
on.
But Lee, I don't think we ever had a young guy come along that was more keen on officiating than Lee. And he was a great skater. In fairness, he was a little naive. I picked him up on his first road trip. We were going to New Liskeard to do a game. And he came out and he had his referee bag and then 2 other bags. And I said, Lee, like, we're coming back after the game. Yeah, I know. He said, but I'm the junior official. And if anything happens to the car on the way down, it's my job to go and get help. So I have to bring my boots, my other coat, and everything else. But Lee could skate like the wind. And we were in Huntsville one night, and they put their lines down with crepe paper. Okay, they put the crepe paper down, and then they'd flood over it, and that's how they did their lines. But they also had the heaters
Yeah.
deflecting into the stands to keep people warm.
Yeah.
Well, I guess over a period of time, they shifted.
Yeah.
So we're doing the game, we're going along, and I guess it kind of ate through the ice. And Lee, his legs were just, it was a treat to watch. His legs would just be flying, he's skating. He hit a piece of crepe paper, and I don't think he landed until he got to the goal line.
Oh my.
He just went flying. But, we had a good bunch of guys that made it a lot of fun. They
I had
made it
a
a lot of
chance
fun.
to interview. I got an interview Tim Foster.
Yeah.
On my, I'm not sure if you guys seen it, but I had when he retired a year ago.
Yeah.
He had some good tales. Yeah.
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 He was involved in a long time too.
Yeah.
Very long time, and he still is a minor official, off-ice official with the battalion. So you still see him at the games.
Yeah. Yeah.
He fills in for Glenn Campbell as the video goal judge when Glenn's not there. So he's got a lot of experience. And
Any good stories about Tim there? Because he's not here, so we can tell them.
Well, I'm going to tell a story about Tim and Ken.
Okay.
Now, you got to remember, I always said that God dealt in perfection. God made linesmen. And when they screwed up enough, he turned them into referees. Okay. Now, I will say, I was bright enough to figure out that when Ken came to town, if there was a big game, I wasn't going to be with the armbands. So I really focused on trying to be the best linesman that I could be. And as it worked out that we worked a lot of stuff together.
in your opinion,
Yeah. Well, I was out there with you. I carried you.
I have
So-
covered you. by
Yes,
the way.
easy.
I've seen you.
So, because of Ken's schedule and Tim's schedule and the amount of night meetings and everything that I did with the city, East-West games, I could get the afternoon off. And I think that probably the 3 of us, I'd say we probably did at least 15, maybe 16 East-West games together. And so what we'd do is we'd rotate. We'd each referee a period, and then the other 2 guys would do the lines. Now, Tim did some lines. I don't think he ever went on the ice when he got here without the armbands on. So
last
you're
time I aligned was in Vancouver Island.
So you're out there with these guys, and I did lines and I refereed, but I'm out there with these 2 guys who have referee mindset. So they're working lines, and they're getting their arms up for penalties, and they're calling. It was funny. But the East-West games, they were classics. I remember one I went in, and the guy went to cross-check a guy. I put my helmet in front of him. He broke a stick over my helmet. To avoid getting a guy, but we had a lot of fun doing those games because the kids really rose to the occasions.
Well, place was jammed too.
Oh yeah.
Which really hyped up the games.
Huge event. Yeah.
Bert Templeton, dealing with Bert. It wasn't what everybody thought it would be, was it?
No, I'll tell you the one thing I really enjoyed about Bert. When
Yeah.
the game was over, the game was over.
Yeah.
I remember one night, and back in those days, the bench was over on the one side across from the penalty bench there, same size as the penalty bench, I should say. But there was only a low glass, eh? So one night, near the end of the game, I blow down the play because I saw the puck hit one of the flags. Well, Bert didn't see that, so he's there and he's leaning over glass and he's just yelling at me. And I look at him and I said, "Bert, does this mean I'm not getting a Christmas card this year?" He told me years later he had to turn around and walk away. What do you want me to say? Ty Domi, he was playing with Peter Rowe and I was refereeing. And so I do a game and Peterborough's in Oshawa, and Ty caused a lot of problems out there. And this one game, the guy sticks him and takes off and gets right off the ice. Ty's right behind him, chases him right onto the Oshawa bench, and there is just a schmozzle. And it took a long time to kind of clean it up. So maybe 2 weeks later, I'm in Peterborough. They're not playing Oshawa, thankfully, and Ty's there, and he deserves to get an assist, but I'm not giving it to him. Right? He's over. He says, "Millsy, I should be getting an assist." I said, "Yeah, but I'll tell you what. If you're good for the rest of this game, you don't cause me any more grief, I'll give you the assist. But you have to be good for the rest of the game." And there's like 55 minutes left. The rest of the game? Yeah, the rest of the game. So his son ended up, playing in the league, and I had a few dealings with his son. I'd be at events like their tryouts or the Russia Canada series. With his son was there, and so I met Ty, and I said, "Do you remember that?" He said, "Yeah, I do. You were the referee." So we kind of laughed about that.
Did you ever give him that assist?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So he was
because he was good for the rest of the game.
That's a good way to do that. You hold the apple back. Yeah.
So we're doing a game one night, Centennials and Oshawa. And the league, in their infinite wisdom, decided that we were going to have our names on our back. Well, with my last name as a referee, I didn't need that. Anyways, I made a call at the blue line, and this player, he flung a racial comment at me.
Kingston player.
Yeah, it was Kingston. Yeah, you're right. It was Kingston.
It was a Kingston player. I was refereeing.
Yeah. So I made a comment to him. A couple of minutes later, he makes another comment to me. So now he's on the bench, and I'm in front of the bench, and he starts again, just racial slurs at me. I figure enough of this. I turn around and I lean into the bench, and we're going at it. All of a sudden, I feel this hand in the middle of my back. Gives me a yank. It's him. He pulls me back on the ice. So the period ends, and Rick Kornakia
Is the coach.
he's the assistant coach. He'd been the coach of Oshawa. That's why I got mixed up. He was coaching in Kingston.
Yeah.
And he calls me over. And he said to me, he says, "I want to tell you," he said, "I heard what our player said. I want to apologize to you on behalf of the Kingston organization, and I'm guaranteeing you that he will be disciplined when he gets home." So that's, again, another side that you didn't see. You didn't see. And the rapport on the ice, I mean, Kenny had a lot more of it than I did because he had a heck of a lot more games. But the rapport on the ice with the guys was pretty good. Yeah, it was good.
Is it different now? Do you know?
The game's different.
The game's totally different.
Totally different. They didn't take prisoners back then.
Yeah.
Now it's.
These guys are afraid to make mistakes because it's so much involved.
Yeah, the whole society's changed. So I remember when I started policing. You go into a bar and if there was a ruckus, they throw the chairs at you. And apparently now you go into a bar, they set the chairs up because they don't want to get themselves into trouble or whatever. But all of society has really changed. The game itself is, I think, it's changed for the betterment. In a lot of cases, especially in speeding up the game. We really sped up the game with different rules like clearing the zone rule and the no line change rules. They've done what I would say is a good job of speeding the game up, but I don't think you're going to get much faster than 210, 215. Now our average is between 215 and 220, and it used to be always over 2.5. but it's changed. But I think the hockey's better. It's not as much clutching and grabbing. The skilled players have an opportunity to play the game.
Yep.
Where they had to be able to do it with somebody on their back, before. So, and I have to credit Steve Walcom with a lot of that, because I've had a lot of conversations with him about the game.
Right.
He still comes up here in the summer. He has a cottage on Trout Lake. Lives in Pittsburgh, and in the winter, and obviously goes to Toronto where his office is. I don't know how much he goes there, but most of the time he's in Pittsburgh. But he has done a lot to speed up the game and make it a much more enjoyable experience for the players and obviously for the fans.
You mentioned Steve, and I don't think it would be a complete interview unless we talked about his dad, Jack, and what Jack did. Jack was, when we had the zone system, Jack was president of the West Zone, the smallest zone in the city. He ran it like a business. And then after he got out, the zone system fell apart and that, Jack became our referee in chief. And he was a no-nonsense type of guy. We had so many leagues, and he would be scheduling all those leagues, and he'd be in charge of things. He'd be working with a guy by the name of Don Brown, who Don would do he'd make sure we all got paid. It was really you needed that one person off the ice, and Jack Walcom was that guy, and just a tremendous guy to be part of our off-ice team.
It really does take a whole lot of good people to put that kind of stuff together, and
It doesn't. I don't think any organization operates without volunteers.
Oh, of course.
Maybe you cover some of their expenses. Give them a few extras like clothing. The golf shirts and the jackets and stuff. But you need those volunteers to, and it doesn't matter what sport either. You have to have them without question.
Dedicated people. Yeah.
Speaking of volunteers, were you ever considered worthy enough to do the novice or Atom tournament in Ferris?
I did it.
Did you really?
A number of times, and I used to get my skate. Mug and laces.
And a pack of double mint gum.
And it seemed to me it was Peter Webster that was handling that back in those days, and actually handed out. Yeah, I always helped him. I like doing minor hockey. Go out there with the kids and really help them out as they're learning. But I think I always felt it was important that you were going back to your sort of early stages and working with those young officials. Like Dave said before, we always did our 1 or 2 games a month, our share of minor hockey, one night of men's league, and we were usually together in the men's league, and they were fast games.
We started at 10:30 at night. You didn't want to be there all night.
Yeah.
These 2 tournaments that we talked about, the one was run by the West Ferris Ladies Rec. Mrs. Mitchell used to run that tournament. And the other one was run by West Ferris Minor Hockey, the Novice and Atom tournaments. They were big tournaments. And you didn't get paid, but as Ken said, they'd give you a beer stein, they'd give you a new pair of laces and a pack of gum. And it was an honor when you got asked to do that tournament. I remember the first year I worked with Garth Van Meer and Leo Sheehan, who are 2 of the finest people you could ever have met. It was a real thrill to go back and do those tournaments. And they ran them like they were pros.
It's tough now to keep referees on the job, and get them involved.
The numbers are way down.
Yeah.
I know that when I was refereeing chief for the NOHA for 20 years, and we always were over 1,000 officials. They're barely at 500 right now.
Oh.
There's a little less hockey, but there were, like last year especially, there was games canceled because they didn't have the officials.
Yeah.
Now, last year probably not a good example because of the pandemic and stuff. Probably a lot of the officials just weren't going to work and not going to, take the chance to get involved.
Yeah.
But even this year, they started a program this year where they'll pay for their equipment if they get involved in officiating.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how well it's doing. I know there's been some officials, because I've heard them talking about it, that they've had a few come out, but they need to really encourage more to get to come out and work those games.
But Ken, isn't it also, the game is more difficult to officiate, and there's still the age-old problem of the people on the other side of the boards, the parents, the other people, that you got that young kid and who doesn't have a senior official out there with them, the intimidation factor, the coaches with an intimidation factor, the lack of respect. The kids are saying, I can't handle that, right?
Yeah. No, that's probably the biggest reason why they don't stay, or they get out of it after a short time. But that was the same reasoning back when 30, 40 years ago.
It's always been an issue.
Yeah, it's always been an issue.
When you say you got 500 officials, how many level 5s, level 6s do you have out of those 500 officials in the north?
I don't know the numbers right now, but I don't know of any level 6s left. I don't know of any. There used to be Glenn, Tim, myself here, and then Jack Smith over there. The guy in the Sioux, Raycraft, Danny Raycraft, and I think he's the only one.
But today they're not lasting, are they?
No,
They're not lasting.
No.
It's got to be tough today.
yeah.
Well, it's good that you guys have some stories from way back when, right?
It was a lot of fun. And some pretty solid friendships that developed over. I refereed for 22 years, and as I said, I just wish I'd kept a notebook. I had a lot of stories, didn't I?
Well, there's stories that you didn't want me to tell.
No, you can't tell.
What story were you burning to tell? What story do you want to tell? That's
You got to turn the tape off. No, there was a lot of extremely good hockey, a lot of esprit de corps amongst the officials. The relationships with the teams, when the game is on, but once the game is over, like I said about Bert, the game is over. And I used to go to the rink a lot because that's where my wife worked, and I'd go there and train and run the stairs there, getting ready for the season and trying to stay in shape back in those days. So you'd run into Bert quite often, but he never ever once said anything about the game. He told me once, I don't read the rule book. It's not my problem. That's yours. That's your problem.
Yeah.
I don't like the call. It doesn't matter what the rule says. I still don't like the call.
Do you remember the night Kenny and I were doing a game after Bert had come back from the World Juniors with a punch-up in Piastani?
Yeah.
And the game was over, and we'd had a shower, we were walking out of the rink, and we're walking by Bert's office. The door was open, and Bert was in there, and he was having a pop, and he kind of waved us in. And we went in, and he told us the story of what happened, and when it was over, and they were sitting in the airport, and the young official that had done the game walked in, and he sat on the other side, and Bert went over to talk to him, and he says the fear in this kid's eyes. And all Bert, and this is the side of Bert, he said to the guy, look, it wasn't your fault. They never should have put you in that game. But,
Yeah.
they always wanted that neutral official.
Yeah.
But, you could go and sit and, after, like Kenny says, the game was over, you'd go in, you could sit down and shoot the breeze with them. In the summertime, when him and Sandy be walking their dogs and playing ball at Amelia Park, I was playing out, he'd come stand along the side of the fence, and he was the persona that he brought to town melted away pretty quickly. And he was a real asset, I think, to the Centennials and to our city as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that, and he kicked me out of the media room. I wasn't allowed free beer anymore. I wrote a feature on one of his practices, and I quoted him swearing a Blue River, and he claimed that he never swore. I'm like, all right, all right,
Yeah.
but that's cool. He was a character for sure.
Yep.
And respected, and he did big things. I think. Yeah. No, there's a lot of guys like that.
Well, Butch Turcotte.
Yep.
Butch Turcotte. When I
delivered him a magazine the other day.
when I got into refereeing, Alex Giesler and I got into refereeing, and Butch was the referee in chief. And he pushed us along, and Butch had a fairly short fuse.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a game. The midget league was great hockey back then, and there was a game, and they were shaking hands at the end, and I think it was one of the Nicholsons and Ronnie Townsend came together and just started throwing them. So Alex and I jumped in, but Butch was so upset that they did that to his game. He jumps in. Alex and I were more concerned about getting Butch out of there than we were about the two guys who were fighting.
Mm.
But then when he went on, I mean, that's another thing. We got to do great hockey because of the AAA. The AAA tournament. You know, you think of the guys that came in here, the Hatchers, LaFontaine, Turcotte, all these guys that came in.
Canusa Cup.
Yeah, it was, that was another guy, and I know that he told his players, Kenny Miller's doing your game tonight, and here's what to expect. Dave Saad's doing your game tonight, and here's what to expect. And if they did something that dumb, Butch would step in. Yeah, he's a good guy, real good guy.
He's in it for the right reasons. Larry Keenan, in it for the right reasons. You know, for the kids. You know, it's not about him. It was about the kids and the game. You know, which I had a lot of time for.
Larry was great. I mean, if you stood on the sidelines and watched a game, I know whether Kenny or myself were refereeing the game, you'd think that there was absolute hatred between us and Larry. But it was comical. It was comical. What was the name of the coach of the Sioux team? Tatar, whatever it was. Anyways, him and Larry just didn't get along.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. But
so the benches at West Ferris
they're beside each other.
were beside each other. So we're doing the game. I'm refereeing, and Lee Rose was one of my linesmen. And they've had enough talking. They come together, face to face. So the play was stopped, and there was a board between the two benches. And Lee, he's climbing up the boards to go in and break. Like, get back down here. He says, but they're going to fight. I said, yeah, and we got the best seat in the house. Just let's see what happens here.
Yeah.
They didn't, but and you could have that kind of fun with coaches like Larry and Butch and the guys in high school. Stan Courtney, goddamn sad. That's Stan. Yeah, it was a good time. It was a good thing to do in the winter. I never would have come close to any of that as a player. I was not a good hockey player, but I got to experience things that I never would have experienced as a player.
So another time we're at Maple Leaf Gardens, and these guys go out for the warm-up, and I run into this fella that I know really well, and he's there with a group of people, Rod Vincent, and he's there with the girls and the men's Panther hockey teams.
Yeah.
And so I said to him, you know, I'd really like a rendition of Drop the Puck Saad around the 10-minute mark of the first period. So Dave's about to drop the puck, and you hear this Drop the Puck Saad come out. He's looking all over. I skate over. You got friends down here too?
I mean, it's an OHL game. There might have been 2,000 people there, which is like 50 people at Palangio Arena.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, out of the rafters. Okay, so I want to put an end to this. It's not going to ever put an end because I still get it and I haven't refereed in 25 years. Dave Reed and Lee Frederick were the two guys that started that. Our family had season's tickets in Section 3, Row A, right behind the visitors' bench. And there was a gang, Lee and Dave and Montemiros. So there's a gang of guys that are sitting there, and Lee and Dave started this to bug my mom. My mom was a big hockey fan. Well, of course, doesn't it catch on? I'm getting it in other rinks.
All the way to Toronto.
I'm getting it in Maple Leaf Gardens, and today I still get it. So you live with it.
That's funny.
It was the look on his face.
Yeah.
You know, that was worth the price of admission for me. Eh?
Oh, for sure.
And actually, Rod and I golfed together quite a bit, and we've laughed about that a few times.
no
Yeah,
doubt.
those sick people.
Yeah, Rod recruited me to cover the Panthers when I was at college, so I was
Okay.
his secretary. And after the games, you know, I go, okay, so now we got to do the interview, and he's like, I don't have time. Make so and so look good.
He's having a rough time right now. He's had to spend the last month in Costa Rica.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I said. That's pretty rough.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he gets out of shape someday.
Yeah.